Hey everyone, happy Friday. We made it to the end of the week and the last day of our 5-day free group that we have going on for intentional living and overall wellness. So last night we had the future Dr. Chelsea Carwath on, and she talked about all things physical health and how that impacts our mental and emotional health. And today we're going to wrap it up with talking about hydration and also relationships and how to communicate effectively in relationships and what we could do if there's some conflict in relationship as the seasons approach, as the holiday seasons approach, and we might be going home and might be visiting family and things like that. How can we better our relationships overall? I'm going to take these off. These are my blue light glasses, but I'm kind of seeing a glare. So I am at my home office, so that's why it looks a little bit different behind me. But I am excited to come with you with some resources and things like that about how to improve your overall relationships. So like we learned last night with Chelsea, is that she was describing how stress impacts our physical health. And then vice versa, how stress can impact our physical health and also our mental health. If our physical health isn't in the best state of mind, it could bring on more stress, or it could bring on anxiety symptoms or depression symptoms. So one of those stressors could be relationships stress. So we have to learn how to manage our relationships, and we also have to know how to communicate effectively. Sometimes it might look like putting boundaries up, which are either physical boundaries or emotional boundaries. Sometimes it's just learning how to communicate effectively, asking for forgiveness, or what to do if someone's not willing to forgive you, or if someone is not apologizing back. All of those types of dynamics come into play when we talk about stress and stress regulation. So the one thing that I always talk to my clients about when we talk about relationships is, what is a healthy relationship? And we'll come up with kind of terms, and we'll have a dialogue about what they feel like a healthy relationship is to them. So we could be talking about intimate relationships, such as like spouses, or any other like boyfriend girlfriend type of relationships, or we could just be talking about friendships. So we talk a lot about like, what would you like to see in an intimate relationship, or what would you like to see in a friendship, identifying some of those red flags. I encourage them to write all those things down, like what are some things and characteristics and traits that I would like to have in a relationship when it comes to intimate relationships and friendships and that type of thing. Then we also kind of talk about red flags. What are some red flags that we might see in a relationship that might kind of put up a little warning sign for us that we might have to draw a boundary and kind of separate ourselves from this relationship because it might be a little toxic. So kind of like what Chelsea was talking about with inflammation flowing through our body, is that there could be a lot of things in our environment, in our foods, and that type of thing that could be toxic, so that we have to try to figure out how can we decrease that so it's not increasing inflammation in our body and causing more stress on our physical state, which then in turn is more stress overall in our mental and emotional well-being as well. So there are such things as toxic people out there, where there might be people that are just toxic to your environment and to who you are and your well-being and your self-esteem and your self-worth. And those types of people we want to set boundaries around, and maybe not necessarily, if we don't know how to deal with them right then and there, we definitely want to kind of draw a boundary around that, and kind of process and discuss that further and what that would look like. But as we go home for the holidays, it might be difficult if there's a family member, or if there is, mother or father and that type of thing, to draw a boundary in that relationship, because you might be all together for the holidays or family dynamics and that type of thing. So what can we do? So the first initial thing I'm going to probably recommend is to draw up an emotional boundary for yourself. To know that this might happen. Set expectations for yourself. This might happen in this situation. How am I going to respond? Is the first step. So to lower your expectations of that person and of that relationship is very important as well. Most of the time in relationships, we have conflict, or we have like inner conflict, or we're disappointed, or having all these negative emotions because we don't expect that person to be doing that, and it's hurtful, right? So my first thing is to first lower your expectations. Not that that's not going to protect you from getting hurt. It's not going to. You still might get hurt, but lower your expectations of what the situation might look like, and then rehearse in your head, what am I going to do to respond or to react in this situation if this happens? So the next thing is, if I want to communicate something to someone, we need to be looking at the communication patterns and what that might look like. So a couple steps that I give to my clients when we talk about communication with relationships is, first and foremost, what is my intention for communicating what I want to communicate? So is my intentions clear? Are my intentions good? Are they not coming from a selfish type of mentality? And my intentions are to not like hurt the other person. What is my intentions for communicating this? Is it going to have a movement through the relationship, or is it going to stop the relationship or not make the growth in the relationship? So first and foremost, what is my intention for communicating what I want to communicate? The second step for communication with a loved one might be, who am I communicating with? So we could really identify like, okay, I'm communicating with this person. And then the next step from that would be like, okay, so what has happened in the past when I try to communicate something like this around that? And that might be different based on if I'm communicating the same thing with another person. So you have to identify what my intentions are with communicating what I want to communicate, who am I communicating with, and then based who I'm communicating with, how do I need to say it so this particular person can hear the message that I'm trying to get across, or the intention that I'm trying to get across. So that is going to be a little bit of a skill that you might have to step back and kind of think a little bit about, process a little bit with, and try to think, okay, like, how am I going to say this that this person is going to hear my good intentions that I have behind sharing this with that person? So when it comes to communication, there's a couple steps that are going on. The first thing is, what is my intention for communicating? And that might stop you in your tracks right then and there. You might say, well, my intentions are just to kind of prove them wrong. Well, is that going to be growth in this relationship? Is that going to be moving this relationship forward? Probably not. So I would encourage you to not share that and to not communicate that until you process it, maybe discuss it with your therapist or discuss it with a close friend or another close relationship, and then move forward from there on how you're going to do that. So identifying your intentions, identifying who you're going to communicate with, identifying based on who you're communicating with, how am I going to communicate that? And then also the final step is, what is going to be my reaction when I communicate this, and based on their reaction. So they are going to say something in response to you communicating, or they might not say anything and they'll have some sort of like nonverbal. So how are you going to respond to that? So there's a lot of different steps to prepare you for tough conversations around maybe conflicted relationships or tough communication. So walk through some of those steps, think about it a little bit, and kind of see if it is purposeful, if it's intentional, and then exactly how you can communicate. I do say a lot of the times appropriate communication could be formed in a question rather than in a statement, and we don't think about that as much. And what I mean by that is, like, if you want to maybe have some sort of tough conversation with someone, like a loved one or a mom or a dad or things like that, about, I don't know, dinner, or how they are progressing through the holidays or something along those lines. Instead of saying like, well, you know, I don't agree with that, or I think you should do it like this. You might have good intentions for saying that, but it actually might sound better or might come across with asking them a question like, so what is your intention for doing that, Mom? Or how do you plan on, you know, meeting everyone's needs in that type of situation? Or what does that look like for you? Or you know, something like, well, when did you discover this? Or when did you come up with this plan? type of scenario. So to ask a question to them to gain more information so that it creates this conversation rather than you just projecting a statement at them having to react to the statement, and then you have to react to their reaction to the statement. Does that make sense? So ask questions, ask open-ended questions so you can keep the conversation flowing in a loving, caring way in the relationship. So that is a lot of information about relationships, and there's so much more that we could probably get into that we haven't even dived, kind of just skimmed the surface a little bit. But I really wanted to share my 4 main tips that I go over with a lot of my clients on communication. And the very first one, once again, I'll repeat them again, is what is your intention for communicating what you want to communicate? Who are you communicating with? Based on who you're communicating with, what or how do you need to communicate for that person to be able to hear you? And then what is going to be your reaction to their communicating back to you? So if you know that, like, well, my reaction is probably not going to be very good if they answer it this way or if they say this, then maybe you need to figure out a different way to say it so then that can better your reaction. Or maybe you need to work on those feelings that are backing that reaction. Most of the time we're having some negative thoughts or negative feelings or unfavorable feelings attached to that person, and we have to kind of work through that before we have some more conversations, communication with them. So anyways, that is a lot to kind of cover in a short amount of time, but if you have any other questions on relationships and how to balance them and how to kind of go through them a little bit, please reach out, let me know. I would love to answer questions that you might have, scenarios that you might have, that type of situation. If you are going home for break, because I know a lot of us are college students, or we might, be going to our parents to stay or things like that, I would encourage you to stick with a routine, stick with a schedule that you want to do, so then you're not kind of thrown off track and kind of get kind of stuck back into what that family role wants you to do. So stick with the routine, stick with the schedule, kind of go through what you want to do in the day. Think about what you want to communicate. Think about your intentions for communicating, and remind yourself things that you're grateful for, back to our journal entries, every single day. What's something you're grateful for about that particular person or that family member, or what you're grateful for about your family in general, to always set yourself up for a positive mindset in the beginning of your day. So anyways, guys, I hope you have a great holiday season, and I would love to hear any more questions that you might have and anything that you would like to hear also in the group. And we also have some essential oil specialist, Jill McCarty, coming on later on. She's going to be sharing a video all about essential oils, so check in with that. And I am excited to kind of continue and to wrap up this awesome 5-day resources all for you. So, all right, guys, have a good day.